Campus Selection project, we're going to move from Playground to creating an iOS app. And we're going to create an iPhone app in which we will have a label and then 5 buttons representing 5 different educational institutions in our area. We click each button that contains the acronym or abbreviation of that institution and see the full name. So we'll have a button that says ASU, we'll see Arizona State University, one that says NAU, Northern Arizona University, and of course SMCC, South Mountain Community College. And you can see here then the 5 captions for our buttons and what's displayed in the label when we click those buttons. We're going to use a storyboard to do this with outlets and actions, tying our code to our storyboard, to our interface. And the focus here is on creating iOS apps using Xcode storyboards and writing Swift code behind the scenes to make things function. Let's jump over Xcode and I'll walk you through my process of doing this. I would encourage you, if you want, first try this on your own. I would encourage you to first try this on your own based on what you've seen in terms of the previous videos on storyboard workflow. But if you have any struggles, then watch the rest of this video with my code review. I'm in Xcode. I'm going to go to the File menu and choose New Project. We're going to create an iOS app. So I'm going to choose iOS, choose App, click Next, give the project a name. I'm going to call mine O2D Campus Selection. Choose your Apple ID certificate. You can create that ahead of time if you want. Once it's created, you can have a drop-down list of different certificates. I'm going to choose my personal one. And then your organization identifier, you can use com.your last name. This is usually a reverse URL of your developer site. You have 2 choices of Swift UI or Storyboard. I'm going to use Storyboard. Language is going to be Swift. Click Next and choose where I want this to be located. So I'm going to go to my iOS folder and choose Create. I haven't set up GitHub. I'm not going to use GitHub at this point. I'm just going to click Cancel. But here then is my project. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this over. On the left-hand side, we have our file structure for the project. Now you see we have our project and then there's 3 folders. We're going to focus on this first folder, which is our source code. We have 2 additional folders for doing test and UI test. We're going to ignore those at this point. Inside our folder for creating our app, our source code folder, there are a couple things we're going to be concerned with. We're going to be concerned with main. That's going to be our main storyboard. And then the view controller is going to be our code behind done in Swift. If we were adding things like graphics or changing icons, we'd go into the assets to do that. So let's go to our main storyboard. And I want to bring up the library. I can click the little plus sign up here. You can also go to the view menu and choose library there. So for my library, I'm going to take a label. And I want to label here up towards the top. Now I should mention here in the storyboard, down at the bottom, you'll see I'm designing this for an iPhone 14 Pro. I can click on that and I can choose different devices that I want to design for specifically, including an iPad. I'm going to leave it at iPhone 14 Pro. But I'm going to take my label and I'm going to stretch it out. I'm going to leave a little bit of margin on both sides, left and right. And I'm going to bring this down just a little bit more. On the attributes panel on the right-hand side, and that's these 3 little sliders icon. So in the attributes inspector, I can choose a font. Right now it's System 17, but I want to make that bold. So I'm going to click the little T here. And I can choose to make this bold. Can also change the font size and the font. I'm just going to click Done. You can also change the font size using the arrows to the right. I do want to align this to the center, so I'm going to click the Center Align button. That puts my text in the center of the label. And I'm going to come down to where we have the background. And I'm going to create a color. or add a color. Now there's a whole bunch of specific colors I can choose from. I can also select custom, and in the custom we have some tabs up here at the top. I can do a color wheel and just go in and select a color. I do want a light blue. I can use RGB sliders or type in a hex color. For working on, for branding a particular company or a particular client, they may have a very specific shade of something they want you to use. You can type in that hex color there. We can also choose named colors, and those named colors can be from Apple. They can be developer, they can be crayons, they can be web-safe colors. So if I choose web-safe, these are the colors I can choose from that are recognized by web browsers. I can also choose from a spectrum. And then there's some colored pencils here I can choose from. These also basically represent the various web colors. So I'm just going to go back here to, let's go to the web colors. I want a light blue. So we'll do the 99FFFF. I can also add these to swatches. In the Attributes Inspector, I'm going to change the text from label to click a college button. All right, I'm going to close my colors. I'm going to bring up the library, and I'm going to add a filled button. Now notice there's different types of buttons in our library. We've got button, gray button, tinted button, filled button. Those can also be changed in the attributes here under style, those same 4 types. So I've got a filled button, gives us a blue background. You can change that color in the attributes. Down here for tint. So I'm going to change the text here to be ASU. I'm going to copy that button and paste. Move it over to the right. Let's change this to U of A. Paste another one. This one will be NAU. Fourth one is GCU. And then we'll do a 5th one, which will be SMCC. So I'm going to take these 5 buttons, and I want them basically to be associated together in terms of visually, maybe some spacing. It's going to be easiest to do that, to add another control, which is a stack, horizontal stack layout. So I'm just going to look for stack. We have a horizontal and a vertical stack layout. I'm going to bring the horizontal over. I'm just going to basically align it here to my label. And then I'm going to take these 5 buttons and drag them into the horizontal stack. Now, if you look at the navigator for our storyboard, you're going to see those 5 buttons now are indented under stack view. They are now children of the stack view. So with the stack view, I'm going to set the distribution to fill proportionally. Let's add a little bit of spacing here. I'll do maybe 5 units spacing. Now the key to working with storyboards, to make things look good on different devices, make sure everything aligns well with each other and is positioned correctly, is constraints. I'm going to start with my label. I'm going to come down here to what I call the COVID-19 symbol. It's a little square with 4 spikes coming out of it. I'm going to set a constraint between the label and the item above it. Now there's no items above it, but what is above it is the safe view. So this is basically going to be, let's make it, I don't know, 50 units from the top. I'm going to click here and add a constraint. Before I do that though, I'm also going to set the left and the right, or leading and trailing, to 16 units. So I'm going to add those 3 constraints. Notice it kind of collapsed. I'm going to add one more constraint here, and that is a height constraint. Let's make this 60. Let's give it a little more weight. And in the size inspector panel, you'll see those constraints set up. If you want to get rid of one, you can click it and delete it. That's how we work with constraints. Okay, let's take our stack view, and we'll set up constraints to the stack view. in that I want to do a constraint from it to the label above. So that's the item above it. So we're going to create a, let's do 50 units between the stack view and the label. And then again, I'm going to set up some constraints here in terms of left and right. Again, we'll go 16. We'll add those constraints. And that looks pretty good. Let's see how this looks in the emulator. Oh, that looks great in the emulator. Now, if we click the buttons, we want this to say Arizona State University, and it doesn't do anything. None of these work. So that's the next step. We need to take our interface and now do the code behind to make everything work. And we're going to use outlets and actions to make that happen. I'm going to close my emulator. To give myself a little more real estate, I'm going to close the navigator over on the left-hand side. And I'm going to close the panels over on the right-hand side. Just clicking those icons at the top left and top right. There's a little plus sign on the next line, which is to add an editor to the right. I'm going to do that. By default, it becomes my storyboard. I'm going to click on the campus selection folder here and make this my view controller. That's my code behind. Same way over here. I'm going to go to campus selection and make this my main storyboard. So there's my view controller. You can double click on this up here. Your view controller scene that'll center it in the panel. We need to create some outlets and some actions. I'm going to create an outlet for my label. So I'm going to select the label, hold down the control key and drag it over here to my code and let go. I'm going to drag it to above override func view did load. And I'm going to create an outlet. I'm going to name that outlet campus label. It's of type UI label. Don't worry about the storage. It says weak. That's okay. Just say connect. And now we get an @IB outlet weak var campus label of type UI label. And this is an optional. There's a little exclamation mark after that. Next, I want to take the ASU button. Again, hold down the control key and drag. Here we're going to go below that view did load method. And I'm just going to call this campus button. Click. We're going to have all 5 of these buttons use the exact same piece of code. So I'm going to say connect. By the way, you can change this to type any. Let's make it UI buttons, since they're all going to be UI buttons. You might have different types of objects sharing code. I want to make sure this is action. Our event here is going to be a touch up inside. So they click, and then we let go. That's the touch up inside. Click connect. And we need to write some code here. I'm going to use a switch statement. And what I want to look at is sender dot current title. And you can use what I call the IntelliSense. That's actually a Microsoft term. But I mostly teach C#, so I like that IntelliSense terminology. And then I need to add a curly bracket here. We need to add a case. And so our case here is going to be ASU. Need a colon. And then what do we want to have happen if they click the ASU button? We're going to take that campus label and we want to change the text value to equal Arizona State University. I'm going to select the case and the code and paste. And we're going to make this one U of A. Now we're not doing anything as far as case sensitivity here, so we're going to make sure that our cases are exactly as we type them into our buttons. But this is going to be University of Arizona. paste again, NAU, and this is the time. Let me just stop the video here, type in my code, and come back. So there's all my code. I did a little spacing here to make it a little more readable. Make sure you have a default, because in a switch you must have every possible case covered, and that includes the default. There's nothing they can click on besides those 5 buttons. There's no other sender, but we still need a default value there. Now, right now this is only tied to my ASU button. I want to tie this to the other 4 buttons. So there's this little dot in a circle here on line 19. I can come over to that circle. I can click and drag to the U of A button. I can drag to the NAU button. I can drag to the GCU button, and I can drag to the SMCC button. Let's take a look at the panel here again. On the right-hand side, I'm going to go to my storyboard, and I'm going to look at the connections panel. And I'm going to click a button. I'm just going to choose GCU. And here I can see what the different events are that are tied into that GCU button. And I have the touch up inside going to campus button. I have the same thing for NEU, same thing for U of A. So that's how you can check to make sure that those connections were made. Okay, if that wires everything up, let's test this. I'm going to click the Start and Run button, little triangle. It's going to launch it into our emulator. And now we can click ASU. Oops. Uh-oh, none of the buttons are working. Let's go back and look at our code and figure out what's going on. So I'm trying to debug this problem. I'm not sure why current title's not working. It's worked in other programs for me. Sometimes it's easier to try a different approach. So I'm going to add another line of code here that says let title equals sender dot title label. I'm going to unwrap that and get the text of it. So the title label is basically the display. We want the text of the title label. And so then I want to change switch to title. So let's try this and see what happens here. And now those buttons seem to be working. Well, GCU is not working and SMCC is not working. And since they do nothing, I'm wondering if those are still wired up. I might have done something wrong there. So I'm going to go back, stop my program here. Let's bring up our storyboard. So in this one, I'll just change this to our main storyboard. And as I go to this little link here, I see that it's connected to U of A, ASU, and NEU, but for whatever reason, it's not connected to GCU. I might have just simply undone something at some point. And SMCC. And now we'll test it again. And there we go. Grand Canyon and SMCC are connected. They're wired up. Everything seems to be working. Again, I'm not sure why in the code that current title didn't work, but here's a workaround. So as we know, oftentimes there's multiple ways to do something. So if something doesn't work, sometimes the easiest solution is to go back and try a different approach. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the iOS app development cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.